Not sure. I guess the mic is on, actually. All right. Please be seated if you're standing. Those of you at home also. And keep in mind, if you don't have the books, I see pretty much everybody, well, of those of you that I can see, pretty much everyone has the current book we're in, which is the Building Moral Excellence, Peaceful Solution Character Education program, and this is the teacher's certification course. But at home, you can scroll down, and you'll see, if you just watch closely, you'll catch where it is where you'll want to download the books so you can follow along in case you don't have the books. Okay. So I know Chris, when he was talking about some things in the last class and gave us a few experiences of things that he had seen and others had experienced and so forth when it comes to being a leader and being successful in business. And we're going to continue on that route a little bit. I'm going to go back and look just a little bit at some of what's already been talked about and then pull it back in through there. First, though, if we can turn to Lesson Plan 4, page F, that's a great place to start. Excuse me. Now, if you are planning on being a teacher of the Peaceful Solution, which I assume that we all are trying to do that since we're here at this course, here at this class right now, you'll want to familiarize yourself with the teacher's manual and understand, the lesson plan. And this is a guide to help you to kind of see where to go with the class. And depending upon what type of class that you have and what type of group that you have, you might or might not use some of the activities or the scenarios, raising hands, answering and asking questions and discussions and so forth. You have to be flexible. This is a guide for you. All right, so let's look at procedure number 5 on lesson plan 4, page F. That's where we're starting out today. It says, explain to students that they will now focus on learning the skills of a positive, effective leader. Tell students that a skill is something that they have learned and have become proficient in. And, one of the things to remember about that skill, something that you've learned and become proficient in, it means you didn't just go out there and learn like bricklaying. You probably didn't learn it in one day. You had to experience a lot of things. You might have learned how to just a basic mix of mortar or something in one day, but there's still even a lot to that, depending upon temperature, depending upon what you are, what kind of brick you're putting down, or rock, or what have you. You're going to have different types of texture that you're looking for. So it takes time to learn all these things, but over a period of time, you become proficient at it, and it becomes something that you can call a skill, meaning you're skilled in it. And that's just a small example there, but again, it takes time. And one of the things about becoming skilled in something is now you know how to do it, and you learned it from somebody. You were actually being taught by somebody, so therefore you had a teacher teaching you. Now, I remember something that I heard the author say, the author of The Peaceful Solution, Yeshua Hawkins. He said that a lot of people think that teaching is sitting behind a desk and just, with a book in your hand, sitting behind a desk, kind of like what we're doing right now, but there's a reason for this. We also, he said, well, that's wrong. That's not just that's part of it, but that's not teaching. The teaching is all of it combined, the books, the activities, the actual experience of putting what you learn in the books to use with your hands, with your eyes, your ears, your mouth, with your senses. And that's when you are learning and you're able to teach somebody else because they're watching you. Or as you become proficient in it, then you can show them, okay, this is the way we do this. Or this is the way, okay, you got this going on. This is what I did to handle that situation, right? So you can, so that is part of it, you know. It's not just sitting here in a book and reading it, having it in your mind, repeating it. You could even take a test on it, and it doesn't mean that you've become skilled at it yet, right? You got to have it all. Anyway, the reason I bring that up is when we're talking about leaders. You know, leaders are people that, you know, I really like the definition. Let's just go back here for just a minute. In the character unit, it's a little more elementary, but in the character unit, it talks about who is the leader. See, all of the things that we learn along the way in the Peaceful Solution, we've already had before, basically, but maybe on a more elementary level, just spoken a little bit differently, and now we're hearing it again, but with a little more oomph to it. Okay, so who is the leader? It's found on page 126 in the character unit, but there's a statement there that says leaders are simply people who possess qualities and skills that motivate and encourage others towards specific goals. Now, it says it a lot like that also in building moral excellence. But that's pretty basic sounding right there. It's pretty simple. And I just wanted to read that and remind you that the books we've been through aren't, you know, you can't just look at it and say, oh, okay, I marked that one, I went through that one's done, and you put it on the shelf and never pick it up again. No, you'll use all these books all the time, you know. So, okay, getting back here. All right, back to lesson plan 4, page F. So the skill is something you've learned and become proficient in. Ask students to share some of the things that they have become skillful in doing. And if you've got a teacher's manual, you know, some of the things might be, you know, cooking, sewing, driving, typing, things like that. These are things that take a little bit of experience too. You learn the basics about it. You learn the theory, if you will. Learn a little bit about what you're supposed to do, and then you actually, normally people have someone else they can look to get some of that experience, because there's going to be times you're going to have to ask questions. Well, wait a minute. Okay, well, what about when this takes place, you know? And you'll get an answer. And so you're being taught and you're learning. All right, so it says to conclude the discussion, and this is what you would have as a discussion if you were in the right actual scenario, by telling students that they acquired these skills through experience and practice, which we have. Stress that in order to acquire the skills of leadership, you will also have to practice them until you as the student becomes proficient. And that is true. We've already kind of gone through all that. It's being reiterated now. It is a very important thing to remember, you know. All right, then have students turn to page 158 in your handbooks to the section entitled The Skills of Leadership. It says to choose students to read about each skill, but I'm going to choose myself to read about it for you. And then it says to discuss how each skill enhances one's ability to lead. Allow time for students to complete the exercises as they relate to each section, or assign the exercises for homework. And right below that in procedure number 6, it says activity, not just words. And, you know, you look at that, and we might do just a little bit of that too if we have time to do that, which I think we probably will. So let's go ahead and turn on over to page 158 in our Building Moral Excellence books, whether it be the teacher's manual or student's manual. All right, so up at the very top of the page, it says a positive leader is able to communicate in a manner that is sincere, appropriate, and respectful. And that's a quote from the Peaceful Solution. Now remember, I think it might have been William's class then that he was talking about Hitler and some of the other, you know, these different leaders through time that we've heard about in history, and they were leaders. They might not have been positive leaders, but they were leaders. They led people. They actually got people to follow them. They had interaction with these people, and they motivated and encouraged them to follow them and do the things. You know, they were able to get them to do things, okay? So they were leaders, but what we're trying to learn to be is a positive moral leader. The skills of leadership. having the right combination of positive character and personality traits. Now, I want to stop right there and remind you, and it doesn't hurt to always remind on these basic things that we should know, that we should have learned throughout our experience with the Peaceful Solution, even before we got into the teacher certification course. But having the right combination of positive character and personality, you got to remember there's a line between that character and the personality. Even though they seem so closely related, people often mistake personality for character and character for personality. In the last few classes, last 2 or 3 classes, you have heard about even the person that has the great personality, but they turn into a thief, or you find out they're a con man or con woman. Sometimes after many years, sometimes it takes a long time before people find these things out, because they relied on personality and how nice that person was and how joyful they were and how funny they were and so forth and so on, right? Instead of looking closely at their character before even choosing them to be a, friend, okay? But having the right combination of these traits is only part of being an effective leader. Yeah, if you're going to encourage people and help them and they want to learn from you, you do need to have that personality too. You can't just be just an angry oaf all the time and expect people to want to be like you or do what you would like them to do for the benefit of everyone around. That's not going to occur. It might for a little while, but if you don't have some kind of personality that people can relate to, and you're not at least showing, a little bit of joy now and then, all these things, they work together. If you're not doing that, it's not going to work for you to be a great leader. But another important aspect involves having specific skills that will improve your interactions and will motivate and encourage others to pursue and accomplish positive goals. The following skills are typical of effective positive leaders. So we're going to be learning about how to interact appropriately with other people, how to interact as a leader with other people, and we're going to get some ideas on how to, if you look at the next bold letters there, it says to communicate effectively. The skills of leadership, they communicate effectively. And there's several things that will be used in that communication. If you turn the next page, in bold, it says they actively listen. So again, we're going to be learning a few techniques of actively listening. You're not gonna leave here tonight and say, okay, I've become an active listener now. It just doesn't work that way. Again, you have to work at it. This is a skill, one that you must work at to become proficient in it. Not only do you have to learn about it through whatever you can read about it and just soak in, but you also have to experience it by, other people around and yourself, by doing these things, by noticing that, hey, I am listening. I realized I was listening rather than wanting to talk all the time, Anyway, we'll get to that. But then on the next page in bold, it also says positive leader takes initiative. Getting out there, getting on the front lines, being the first ones, to do something, to make something take place, to do the right thing. And then it also says that a positive leader mediates. Now, it doesn't say meditates, even though you would want to meditate upon what's being said. Think about it. Think about what you're reading, what's being said, and how you're achieving these things, how well you're coming along. You look at what you've done. You think about it. You meditate on it, A positive leader prioritizes. A positive leader knows how to delegate, okay? So we're going to go through all of these things. I don't know exactly how far we'll get tonight, but, hopefully we can get through some of it. All right. So communicating effectively, and again, we've been through this in several of the previous units, so A lot of you will have a little bit of experience at this, or a lot of experience. Have you ever tried to communicate without saying anything, like when you're playing charades? I'm looking at the age of most of these folks in here, and I'd say most of y'all have probably at some point in time in your life played charades. I don't know about some of you younger guys back there or up here if you have, but anyways, it's pretty difficult sometimes to actually communicate and get that message across of exactly what you're trying to do. But in a case like this, it's easy to see just how important effective communication is. Now, communication is the foundation of interaction. I just want to blurt out some stuff that's coming up and everything, but I'm trying to hold back a little bit so that this can be communicated to you in a more organized manner than me just blurting it out, okay? So we're going to take it step by step along here. Communication is the foundation of interaction. It can be defined as the process, so there's a process here, by which information is exchanged between individuals. Notice information is exchanged. The key word in this definition is exchange. Information must be given and received, much like a two-way street, for communication to occur. Excuse me. There are many different ways to communicate, and the two most commonly used are verbal and written. Many people find it easier to express themselves verbally than through writing. However, verbal communication is not as simple as it appears to be. It incorporates several other factors such as tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, and active listening. So for some of us here, that we understand what it was like and what it's still like when you text somebody a message, and without being able to be right there in front of the person and, taking all aspects of communication in stride, sometimes that text message can go wrong. It can go the wrong way. It might not be exactly what you meant to say. You might not be getting that exact message across to the person you were trying to communicate the message to because you didn't have all your tools available. All you had was the written part of it. That's all you had available, and therefore something was lacking, okay? Like it says, it incorporates several other factors such as tone of voice, facial expressions, and, body language. I mean, it takes all those things, right? I mean, I look like I'm really interested in going through this information right now, don't I? Right? Now, on the other hand, I probably look a little bit more interested in it right now, don't I? Okay, and that's just a simple move or two right there, And I really didn't speak it any differently. It was all about what my body was doing. We'll get a little more into that. All right, so, and for some of you younger guys back there, again, even your texting, you've had emojis to work with your texting. Emojis came along a little bit after the fact. Some of us older guys were texting, if we were, texting, and we didn't have emojis. Now, at least we can, say something to somebody and then put a big old laughing emoji face next to it so they know, hey, man, don't take this too seriously. This is what's going on, right? Or, we might put that serious one next to it. The one that, looks like you're very mad and you got some kind of rage fit going on, possibly to let people know that there's a little bit of seriousness to it, And then there's other ones I won't even mention, but there's a whole bunch of emojis to choose from to kind of get a little bit more expression into it, Now, in fact, they have... You can text your message and have it blow up and balloons flying everywhere and music playing in the background and all, So it's all in trying to communicate a little more clearly in that manner. Okay, so tone of voice. Let's start with that. have you ever heard the saying, it's not what you say, but how you say it? Now, already tonight, y'all have experienced, if you've been listening at all, you've heard me use a lot of different tones of voice, in fact, like I'm doing right now, okay? It's changed. It's up and down, back and forth, all around. It's not just, have you ever tried to communicate without saying anything? Like when you're playing charades. Difficult, isn't it? In a case like this, it's easy to see just how important effective communication is. Communication is the foundation of interaction. It can be defined as a process by which information is exchanged between individuals. The key word in this definition is exchange. I mean, so you see how important it is to have all of our tools available when we're trying to communicate? I mean, I'm using a different tone of voice. I'm actually smiling. I got some hand gestures going on. A lot of this, I'm not thinking about any of this. It just comes, from doing it for a while. I do know people who have been kind of challenged along the way when it came to hand gestures. They really never had used any hand gestures. I mean, I'm doing it like all the time, but they never had really used any hand gestures, and so when they started out trying to use some hand gestures to communicate a little more clearly, see, I'm clearly, see the hand gesture that's going with it? It just kind of goes with it. I didn't have to think about it and say, like when it's a little more clearly, but I've seen that where people, you can see the news sometimes and people are standing there talking and their hand gestures are not going anywhere near with what they're talking about, and they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff that has nothing to do with what they're talking about at all, And so watch that a little bit and see. And then think about what you're doing when you're trying to communicate. You can take control of your communication abilities, okay? All right, tone of voice. It's not what you say, but how you say it. Have you ever heard that? I have. The tone of your voice is one way your true feelings can be conveyed. If you have ever called someone and just by the way she or he said hello, you knew that they did not want to talk. Everybody in here ought to have their hand up if I said raise your hand, right? I mean, everybody's made a phone call to somebody and said, hey, how you doing today? I'm doing all right. Or you could tell they've been sobbing. They're, yeah, I'm doing okay. Well, are they doing okay? No. So the words they were saying are just totally out there. It was the tone that you heard. You couldn't even see the person. So you didn't have that tool to work with, but by the tone of their voice, by what was taking place, you were able to perceive, unless they were putting on an act, but you were able to perceive that, hey, something's really wrong. What they're saying is not true. And it might not be that they were trying to, to deceive you by lying to you or something. A lot of people say that just out of habit. Like, hey, how you doing today? I'm all right. How you? They could have all kinds of stuff going on. I'm all right. Yeah, great. And they go on, they go around the corner and cry or something, So, but if you've heard this before, then you are already familiar with how tone of voice plays a role in communication. Effective leaders are aware of their tone of voice and how it affects those they are interacting with. You notice that effective leaders, I'm going to underline that right there. But effective leaders are aware. They're aware of their tone of voice. So there's leaders out there that don't even realize when their tone of voice, and I think we've all been there. I can definitely tell you I've been there, where I didn't realize my tone of voice was getting a little out of hand, raising up there a little bit. But the person that I was talking to or trying to communicate with definitely knew it was going up there a little bit, I've even had people say, well, why are you yelling at me? I said, I'm yelling. I'm not yelling at you, But to them, from how I would normally communicate, with that extra sharp tone, with a little bit more volume to it, see, there's a lot to it, okay? That extra little bit was enough to make them think that, well, I can tell he's upset with me, and they could perceive it to be as, yelling at them. It was definitely something that they weren't liking the experience of. So it was probably right on the level with yelling, with them. So, okay. And I'm sure when that was said, it probably got even a little louder, possibly, We're all learning how to deal with those situations. All right, so effective leaders are aware of their tone of voice and how it affects those they are interacting with. An impatient or hostile tone of voice when giving instructions can put others on the defensive and cause them to feel inadequate or humiliated. Get that? An impatient or hostile tone of voice when giving instructions can put others on the defensive and cause them to feel inadequate or humiliated. On the other hand, a nonchalant or relaxed tone of voice when giving important instructions can cause the hearer to disregard or overlook the importance of what's being said. So where's the line at? You can't win for losing, huh? Where is the line at? Where's the line that goes from being, kind of laid back and carefree and just kind of, hey, if you get around to it, go ahead and do this, right? And to the point to where you're very impatient, on the edge of your seat, and possibly a little bit hostile on it, and say, yeah, no, we need to get that right now, man. You need to get that done now. I'm tired of waiting on it. You add a few words in there, but really the tone of voice itself is enough to get it across that, hey, man, this dude's starting to freak out on me here or something, So quite a bit of difference in those things. So I'm going to read that again. An impatient or hostile tone of voice when giving instructions, and I might add receiving instructions too. This is communication. Remember, it's an exchange. And so if someone is giving instruction and you're receiving instruction, you also have a part to play in that, of that communication, and how you are receiving and understanding the information, and then how you in turn react, and your tone of voice and your facial expressions and so forth. Okay, we have to keep that in mind. It's an exchange. It's not a one-way street. So it can cause people to get on the defensive and cause them to feel inadequate or humiliated, which we don't want to do. We have true care and concern for other people. We don't want to do that to anybody. We might accidentally do it, and if it's brought to our attention, we can look at it and say, I need to work on that. I'm not trying to humiliate anybody. On the other hand, the nonchalant or relaxed tone of voice when giving those important instructions can cause the hearer to disregard or overlook the importance of what's being said. And in most cases, what I've seen is that when it's very important instructions that have to be done like right now, you're going to get a little bit more of a sharper, quicker, maybe with a little bit more oomph to the voice, info coming at you if it's something that's got to be done right now. But it's to relay the importance. It doesn't have to be how it's being described right here as impatient or hostile. There's no reason for it to be hostile at all. All right. So I'm sure everyone's experienced that, probably in both areas, either receiving or sharing information. Excuse me, still got a little cough there. All right, so let's go to facial expressions right there. Now this is an interesting part right here too. Well, it's all interesting, don't get me wrong, but this is a very interesting part right here when it comes to facial expressions. Like, why are you doing that right now? Okay, here I am smiling, and kind of by my tone of voice and what I was saying and how it was coming out. Well, it was pretty sure that I wasn't being real glad, was I? It was what was coming out of my mouth and the way it was being said with that tone was actually telling the true story on that one. But it works both ways, I could be sitting here with a frown on my face, and saying, man, I really am glad you did that way. I mean, really? Am I? So, no. Those things don't go together. It's kind of like the guy, a lot of what we do, we've learned by experience and by our environment and the people around us and years of doing it the same way. It's just like when I say no, I shake my head like this, right? Do you also? When you say no, is it like this? When you say yes, are you like this? And does everybody understand what that means? If you asked me something and I shook my head like that, what would you assume that I meant? Would you assume I meant no? No. Would you assume I meant yes by shaking my head like that? Yeah, you would assume I said yes. Well, what if I said no? Or what if I said yes? Would that be a little confusing to you? You know why? Because we are already doing a lot of these things in our daily life when it comes to communication. We are already somewhat proficient in understanding tone of voice, understanding facial expressions, body language, and also what's being said. We're somewhat proficient in those things just because of everyday life and what we've been through and the things we've seen from experience, right? All right, so, but if you don't ever think about it, you wouldn't even know that these things existed. Like when you first try to do that, say no or yes. When you first try to do that, for most people, it's very hard to kind of get the words out of your mouth, no, while you're shaking your head up and down, yes, okay? So it is kind of tough to change our ways. It's a bit tough to change and go against what we're used to. Just like when we do tell people, when they ask us, hey, how are you doing? Well, I'm doing all right, and you're not really doing all right. But it's just what we do. It's what we've done for so long. And so changing that takes a little bit of time and effort. Just like every part of the peaceful solution, every part of it, we've had to work at, haven't we? We've had to work at changing our lives. Okay, facial expressions. So did you know that there are people who can make others laugh or cry just by using facial expressions? Mimes, without saying a word, are able to communicate emotions such as shock, anger, embarrassment, and joy with their faces. Facial expressions are an important part of how we communicate. In fact, facial expressions and tone of voice together convey more meaning than even the words coming out of your mouth. Studies indicate that over 50% of our communication is conveyed through our facial expressions. Man, is that strong? 50%. Wow. 30% is conveyed through tone of voice, and only 7% is conveyed through the actual words that come out of your mouth. That's pretty strong, isn't it? For example, have you ever heard someone say, I'm not sad, but you can see a sad expression written all over his or her face? Would you be more inclined to believe that what they say or their facial expression? Which one would you believe, Might be you've experienced either as a child or possibly you have a child or had a child, and with one look from you, if they were doing something they weren't supposed to be doing and you looked over at them, gave them that look, did you have to say anything? No. You communicated effectively that you're doing something you shouldn't be doing over there, buddy. Right? Just by doing that. You didn't have to yell at them. You didn't have to do anything like that. You didn't have to go and take some physical action, for the most part. If they're sticking a knife in a light socket, you might want to kind of move on it a little bit. But anyways, just think about that. Think about the times that you've experienced that it's like that, even now, each and every day. Everyone around us, all of us experience these things each and every day. So effective leaders are aware of the words they use and their facial expressions. When facial expressions and words conflict, it becomes confusing and others can easily misunderstand what's being said. When facial expressions and words are in agreement, a clear message is communicated. So, don't get me wrong. Effective leaders are aware of the words they use and their facial expressions and every part of communication. And we do want to convey a certain message to people. And some have become so proficient at it, though, that, well, let me stop right there before I say anything else, because there's a story that goes along with it, but I want to get through the next section first. Let me just stop right there. Just keep all this stuff in mind, that effective leaders are aware of the words you use and facial expressions, and they know that they need to have everything to match, if you will. All right, identify the emotions expressed below. And so for those of you that possibly still don't have a book or not in front of a computer or what have you, if we could look at the overhead here, we can see, sorry about that. Well, that's small. And it's going to stay small. Okay. I'm thinking. Here we go. All right. Okay. All right. See those faces right there? Now, I would venture to say everybody in here could immediately identify those faces. You know, we got this one right here, and what do you think that is? Yeah, glad. We got this one. What do you think it is? Angry. Yes, angry. And even to the point of possibly going past that, just the initial stage, and going on to one of the other stages there. But also, then this one would be what? And this one? Confused. There you go. See how easy that was? Now, imagine if people are seeing that on your face. You know, you got one of these looks on your face right here, right? So people know what they're looking at. I mean, you guys got it just like that, right? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and look at body language, though, too. All right, if you look on down to page 159, body language. Now, whether you lean forward. Now, this one's very interesting, too, right here. And there are those that have mastered it, but this one is a tough one to master because there's so many different things that go along with it. And by the way, when we're talking about all this, just because you picked up a little bit of it, and just because you might have even read a book on all this, you know, you're probably not a pro at it yet on deciphering all this body language and facial expressions and everything. You can be, but it takes a long time and a lot of work to be able to be proficient at it. One of the main, I would think that most people know this. If I were sitting here in class, which I don't see any of you doing this thing that I'm fixing to do, but if I were sitting here in class and I was like this, would you think I was interested in what was being said? No. But hey, I might be. See, that's right. You might be cold. I see someone giving that sign right now. You could be cold. Or you could just be trying to get comfortable because your arm keeps hitting the back of this chair right here, and it's like really bad, you know. So there's all kinds of things that could be taking place. And you, as somebody trying to read body language, needs to keep all that in mind. You can't just focus on one thing without everything else. Say, oh man, that guy's not listening to me. What's his problem, you know? And then you start getting all, you know, hammerjagged and everything. So keep that in mind. It takes a long time to figure all this out, but there are some of the basics that for the most part, you know, probably 80 or 90% of the time when you see that, it probably is someone that's not that interested, but the rest of the time it's probably because they're cold, especially in this kind of weather. You could all have your arms like that right there, and it'd probably be because you're cold for the most part. So, okay, but anyway, let's keep going. Whether you lean forward when someone's speaking to you or lean back and cross your arms, you're communicating without even saying a word. This is called body language, and it's another important part of communication. Folded arms during a conversation usually convey a lack of interest. whereas leaning forward shows that you're intently interested on what's being said. Your body language can either encourage or hinder communication. I see a few people took their arms down. They were like, oh, no, it's all right. I didn't think you were not interested or anything like that. You're here, so it shows you're interested, okay? But anyway, folded arms usually means that or can mean it, whereas leaning forward shows you're interested. Your body language can either encourage or hinder communication. As a positive leader, it's important to be aware of the messages you're sending with your body language. When communicating, do you convey interest in what's being said by sitting up, leaning forward, making eye contact with the speaker, or do you cross your arms? We're now on page 160. Or do you cross your arms, watch the clock, and impatiently tap your feet? All of these and more are ways that you can either encourage or discourage effective communication. Now, I'm going to stop there for a minute and tell you the story. So this really occurred to me. And some of you might agree with what this guy says when I tell you, or you might agree with what was trying to be accomplished. So here I am in a courtroom, right? And there's a couple people that there was probably 2 people there that were Peaceful Solutions students, and one of them in particular had been going through an anger management class, self-control, and was doing quite well, actually. And so his time was coming up, and they wanted me to speak to the, I'm not sure if he was the, at this point, it's been so long ago, he was either the probation officer or prosecuting attorney or something along those lines. I think he might have been the probation officer. But nevertheless, he was in court, and he was someone that wanted to know what was going on with this person and wanted my opinion too. And so he asked me, he said, what is this peaceful solution thing? He said, yeah, I know that it's supposed to make them have a little bit more self-control or whatever, but tell me a little bit more about it. So I told him about it, and when I was done, he looked at me and he said, well, I'm not so sure I like the idea of that being taught. Okay, here I just got through telling him all the great benefits of a person, which I think this man had been accused of some domestic violence or something, but all the benefits of a person learning to control their emotions and learning how to respect people and have true care and concern and think about the needs of others and so forth. Just got through talking to him about all this stuff, and he looked up and said, I'm not so sure that I like that being taught to he was the my probationees. And he could see the look of shock on my face. I didn't have to say a word, He saw the shock, okay? And he said, yeah, I don't want them to know how to get by my questioning. He said, I want to be able to push their buttons. I want to be able to push their buttons till they get angry and fly off the handle. I don't want them taught self-control. No, I don't want this done. Can you believe that? This is what the man said to me right there. And then you wonder why the system is so messed up like it is and why we have so much of this going on. There's people that don't want people to learn. That don't want people to improve their lives, that don't want people to learn how to control themselves and not beat their wife or their children or get in fights or steal or do drugs. There's people that want to see people go down. It's a horrible thing. They need the peaceful solution really, really bad. Right? So, anyways, I had to share that with you. And so in thinking about that, I thought about, this guy, wow, what a pessimistic view of life he must have. And that's one of the things that we want to learn and get across as a teacher in the peaceful solution too, is to be optimistic. You don't have to be a fool running around, oh-de-do-de-do, and just everything that takes place, you're like, oh-de-do. You don't have to be that guy. You can be optimistic, looking for and hoping for the best in people and for the best outcome. you need to be aware that it might not work out, but you can be prepared from the things we've already learned on setting your mind in advance, on giving yourself some room to grow, giving other people some room to grow, thinking about what others have been through, not just yourself, so you can be ready for these things. An optimistic point of view. This is, well, I can't read this whole article. I'll just leave it at that. Other than, by being optimistic, a person experiences less health-threatening stress. He can tolerate circumstances. And remember, we're learning to tolerate also. We're learning to be patient with people. Even if we don't like what they're doing, we're learning to at least tolerate it, Some people, that would really bother hearing that tapping taking place. I know someone that, sometimes I'm really excited and optimistic about what's fixing to take place, and I'll be driving in the car and tapping and, just kind of in a great mood and not even realize I'm doing it, and they let me know real fast that I'm doing that tapping thing again. So, but anyway, they're learning to be tolerant with it, right? And I'm learning to be patient with them learning to be tolerant about it too. So, but anyway, so many things go so much better when you're optimistic. It's like the answers even come to things more clearly and quickly when you're optimistic. If you're looking at a certain chore and you're sitting there looking at it thinking, man, I can't believe I got to do this. But you already know that you've got to do it. But in your mind, if you're putting that in your mind and it's coming out of your mouth, so you're reiterating it, and then to other people around you, and you're saying that there's no way this is going to occur, or there's no way, there's no hope, there's a lion in the road, then you're going to spread that pessimism, and it's actually going to work. You're actually going to be a leader in taking people down that rabbit hole. On the other hand, if you look at it and say, well, I know it looks pretty big, but if we get started now, hey, we can do it. Might take a little longer than what we thought it was going to take, but I think we can get this done. Let's get started right now. That's the optimistic point of view. And it is contagious. It actually spreads. And then people want to hear the optimistic point of view. They don't want to hear the pessimistic point of view. Always remember that. And, I was going to get into a few other things, but it looks like the time is kind of moving along. So let's get back here to this body language. Excuse me. All right. So your body language can either encourage or hinder communication. Being a positive leader, it's also important to be aware of the message you're sending, etc. And then, okay, on over to page 160. We'd already turned the page. Do you cross your arms, watch the clock, and impatiently tap your feet? All of these and more are ways you can either encourage or discourage effective communication. And I have seen people before sitting at a desk where you're trying to talk to them, or somebody was trying to talk to them, a group of people. And I've seen people sitting there, and all they could do is keep looking at the clock. Of course, now there's not so many clocks on the wall or even on our arm. They've got it on their phone, and they've got their phone out and keep looking at the clock on their phone. Isn't that most of it now? Might be some of y'all did that here just a little while ago. Was it okay? I didn't see you. I'm just saying. Okay. All right. So another thing is that they actively listen. Boy, this is the hard one right here, okay? All right, now check this out. What do you see right here? An ear, right? What do you see right here? Another ear. There's two of them, right? You know what I'm fixing to say? Yeah, we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth. For a reason, right? And there's many reasons, okay? It's not just the one that I'm talking about, but you got the 2 ears so you can listen, Hey, it's just something little reminder right there. But I think everybody's already heard that. All right, another important aspect of communication is, believe it or not, listening. Whew, man, is that hard to do when you got something to say? Yeah. Communication generally involves three main components of which listening plays an essential role. First, there's the giving of information, which is usually done by speaking. Then there's the receiving of information, and this is the listening component. Finally, there is a response based on how the information was heard and interpreted. Poor listening skills lead to poor communication. So, some of you already know that I've had a bit of experience in the car business, and in working with people in sales, I knew people that wanted to go talk to the person and start just throwing stuff at them, like, what are y'all looking for? Are you going to buy a car today? Do you have financing, or are you going to pay cash? Or what's the most you want to spend? I mean, within the first 30 seconds or a minute, before they even know anything about the person, before that person knows it, well, no, the person knows a lot about them by what they're asking and the way they're firing off the questions and everything. They know they're interested in one thing and one thing only, But if you can be taught to slow down a little bit and consider yourself a counselor, and in any conversation, you can actually consider this, that if you're in a conversation with somebody and you want to be an active listener, then you have to consider not just your point of view, but the other person's point of view. And the thing that I like to keep in mind is counseling. And some people have different pictures of what counseling is, but anybody that's trying to see what someone else wants and needs and has some suggestions or is looking for what they want and need, there's some counseling and communication taking place here. It's kind of like a real estate agent. If you go in and sit down and you tell them, yeah, I want to go look at that $1.5 million house over there I just saw. It looks pretty neat, and we want to go look at it. They're not just going to go out and jump in the car and take you on a stroll through that $1.5 million house. They are going to find out a little bit about what's going on with you. So they're going to give and share. They're going to share some information, and you're going to share some information with them. And so you're doing some counseling, some working together to come to this solution of what needs to be done. Now, when it's all done, you might be going to look at that $1 million house. On the other hand, you might be going to look at the $75,000 house, because after some initial communication and sharing information and so forth, and if they did it right, it wouldn't be the real estate agent telling you that, hey, you don't need to go look at that, we need to go look at this. It would be you saying, maybe I don't really need to look at something that expensive. Do you have something more in this range? And if that was done, then the communication was shared properly. There was some active listening taking place on both sides. Not to say, using the word sides could mean some kind of adversarial relationship, but that doesn't have to be that way. Some of the most successful people in sales always have the attitude of, nope, if I can get it for them, then I'm going to achieve what I want to, as long as I can get them what they want, right? It's not an adversarial relationship. But I do know a lot of them that it is an adversarial relationship too. But actively listening becomes so very important, because that's the thing that most people have the hardest time learning to do. I mean, a person can even learn the facial expressions, the tone of voice. They can work on those things. It's kind of like something you can control. It's kind of like to stop eating something that you know is bad for you to eat, and you're convinced of it. You know it's bad. You know it's going to harm you, and you've made up your mind, and you just stop doing it, right? Well, that's a physical thing that you can stop right then and there on the spot. But when it comes to learning this active listening thing, it takes a while, because while you're listening, you're also wanting to talk, right? You ever been there? You're wanting to get your point of view across. You're wanting to answer something that was said that the person is saying, but they're not through talking yet. And so therefore you have to take patience, self-control, consideration, respect, all these things into play and put it to work to become an active listener and really listen to what's being said. Not just sitting there quietly and thinking, oh, I can't wait till it's my turn to talk. I'm being so patient and understanding. Oh, not, okay, that's part of it, being tolerant and patient, but yet in listening to what's being said, actually really taking it in and looking at the person and understanding the facial expressions, the body language, the tone of voice, and everything that goes along with it. Now you're actively listening. You're really seeing kind of what's going on. It takes a while, but you can do it. And that's really the thing, is learning to be that active listener. That's one of the top things in learning to communicate better. And where was I at here? I know I was somewhere here in that first paragraph. So first there's the giving, these three major components, main components. First, there's the giving of information, which is done by speaking. Then there's the receiving, that is the listening component. Finally, there's a response based on how the information was heard and interpreted, and hopefully it's a positive response, an optimistic response, one that everybody can deal with. Poor listening skills lead to poor communication. By using active listening, you can greatly minimize the misunderstandings. Very hard to do with that texting on the phone. Very hard to be an active listener because you're not actually hearing anything. You're seeing some things, but active listening involves using your ears, eyes, heart to hear not only the words that the speaker's saying, but to discern. There's a word for you. To discern the underlying intention of what's being said. Now that's something right there, discerning the intention, the underlying intention, the thing that's not being said with the words, right? In fact, the words coming out might even be just totally the opposite of what that underlying intention is. So as you become an active listener, and as you learn more about facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, and so forth, you can become a better active listener and also a better leader, counselor, etc., salesperson. All right, so in other words, a person is actively listening when he hears the speaker's words and tone of voice, sees the body language and facial expressions, and is aware of the emotional state of the individual. We've talked about that before, where it's not always the right time when someone does something that maybe triggers a little something in you, or you're like, man, that guy was so disrespectful. I guess I ought to let him know, But it's not always the right time to go do it right then, because the person's emotional state might not be ready to hear that, and it might not work out very well for anybody. Positive, effective leaders learn how to incorporate all of this into the way they communicate and listen. Active listening is a powerful tool that can be utilized in the following situations. De-escalation of arguments, yeah, that's a big one. Imparting understanding and acceptance, kind of like with the what we were talking about, and then gaining insight and knowledge of an individual situation, which would be used in like a sales environment, a sales setting. Also, not just that, but here are a few simple rules to help you learn to actively listen. Have the right attitude about listening. Be just as willing to listen as to give advice or instructions. Boy, that's a big one right there. Encourage others to talk by using door openers. Phrases such as, well, it sounds as if, okay, it sounds as if what you meant to, what you're saying about that is, or it looks as if you've had this occur to you before, or, blah, blah, blah. It shows that you want the speaker to continue. You're opening it up for them. You're opening that door for them to come on in and continue where they left off at, so that you can gain some more understanding and possibly share some information with them also. And that you're trying to understand the point of view. That goes a long ways, man. When people when people know you're listening, that's when something clicks and they realize that, it's not just about you. Don't interrupt the speaker or change the subject. Consider how you would feel if you really had something important to share with someone and they interrupted and changed the subject while you were speaking. So you consider all of that and put it all to work in this, and we'll start right about in this same area in the next class, which, by the way, will be on Wednesday, 1/29/25 at 5:30 p.m. That's this Wednesday at 1/29 at 5:30 p.m., and we'll pick up where we're leaving off here, and if everything goes well, I might be the teacher that night too, so, Okay. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Hope to see you soon.